You're on.
Hello, world. This is Tim Bagwell, and I'm here with Rich Garling, with two grumpy old men, and we're here to discuss the politics of the day and other things that are going on. Rich, what are we talking about this morning?
Well, I had, Tim, I had two questions that I thought of just this morning, and I kind of like going, okay, how does some of this stuff work? How can this happen? How can it not happen? And so my first basic question was, how difficult would it be to take over the United States due to how our system is structured? And quite honestly, it would be very, very difficult. Okay, in fact, it borders on impossible. And the reason for this, in the conventional sense and by design, is we have structural barriers in the way to centralized control. Federalism itself, which is currently part of our problem, but federalism itself is split between the feds, the states, and local governments, so that even if someone gained control of the federal government, states retain significant autonomy over law enforcement, elections, and governance. Okay,
Right,
so
right.
basically, what we've got out there is 50 little units of government. And then, of course, each one of those are made up of all kinds of local governments. Here, just in Lake County, Illinois, for example, we not only have cities, okay, but we've got towns, we've got villages, we've got townships. I mean, hell, we've got boards that sit there and govern the cemeteries here, and everything.
Well, I
It is-
think there's something like I used to know the figure. The country has well over 1,000 counties.
yeah,
I think.
easily, easily, from what I understand. Now, the other thing is the Constitution itself, and each state has to mimic this, by the way, and that's so because they're required to under the Constitution. They have to match federalism. Yeah, it's called checks and balances. Okay, the Constitution divides power amongst three branches: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. And each has tools to block and undo the other's action. So this way here, supposedly, no single branch can dominate without resistance. Fortunately, the federal government isn't doing that at this moment. And what it's going to take is an election in 2026 that regains control of Congress back from the Republicans because they apparently don't want to sit there and abide by what the Constitution says. But in the meantime, if we go back to that idea of federalism itself and the fact that the power is split between the states and the feds, that's a big wall to have to get over. Now, mind you, Trump can sit there and think that, oh, I'm going to send in ICE or I'm going to send in National Guard troops and we'll control everything that way. Doesn't work
You
that
mean
well.
we're the
What?
Department of War? We're the
Yeah,
Department
the
of War.
so-called Department of War. Yeah, we use the cities as a training ground, for them. What I got a kick out of too, because here's the other bulwark too, and it's called civilian control of the military. The military
Well,
is under civilian leadership, and there's a reason for that because the founding fathers were so afraid of a standing army that could sit there and try to control everything. Okay, because hey, quite honestly, they got the guns. When you get down to it. Well, because of civilian control, and because of the fact that even when I worked for the U.S. Navy way back when. All right, one of the things that I saw and I learned from those guys who were serving was that their oath, the Constitution, is taken so seriously that they're even trained to that they have the right to disobey an unlawful order. Okay, now you saw this little show that Hegseth and Trump put on, okay, and I'm sitting there, Tim, and I couldn't help but think to myself, it's like, my God, and I'm telling Gail this. I go, my God, look at these guys. They're all sitting in this room. First off, they realize the danger of doing that because you don't want to put them all in one room at once, and that for obvious reasons. Okay.
right.
Second thing is just the mere cost of it. But they're all sitting there, and on stage they got a guy. And at first I made the mistake and said the guy was a second lieutenant for crying out loud. And here this bozo's parading up in front of them, to telling them how they got to be big, strong men, and that they can't be fat and all this kind of happy baloney. All right, and that, but turns out I was wrong. he just barely made being major. But that's still got to irk the daylights out of those generals. Okay. And they all sat there stone faced. They did not laugh at any of Trump's so called jokes. They did not applaud. They did nothing. They just sat there. And for Trump
By the way,
to sit there,
I think
well, go ahead.
after they had checked under their seats to make sure there was nothing there that
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly, and all that. But then they sit there, okay, and they knew. I mean, Trump's threat that if you don't like what I'm doing, you're welcome to get up and leave. But of course, you can consider yourself without a job, okay, kind of thing. Then they sat there, even though they don't agree with what he was saying up there, they're sitting there and going, we're not going to go anywhere because we're the guys who are going to stop you. you know, so that was good to see. It's good to see, that they're doing exactly what they're supposed to, and by not saying anything, by being very stone faced and just stiff, rod ram stiff, kind of thing, and everything, that encouraged. That gave me some encouragement.
right,
Okay.
right. I know
And
what you
then
mean.
on top of that, we have independent institutions out there, such as the Federal Reserve. Okay. Now, the FBI, unfortunately, has been taken over. So far, the courts are making it so that the Federal Reserve doesn't get taken over. And the courts, what's been interesting so far is that the bulwark here for the courts have been the lower federal courts and the state courts. They're the ones that are sitting there and saying to them, no, you can't do this,
Right.
thus thus running interference, even though they know that the Supreme Court's likely to overturn what it was that they just decided. Okay,
Yeah.
now we also have what I would consider to be cultural and legal safeguards, our constitutional rights. If there's one thing I think people in this country really, really prize, is what you and I are doing. It's called free speech. It's called freedom of the press. Okay, it's called assembly and due process. And we're going to fight because here's the thing, expect that. Okay. I expect that if I get arrested for something, I have the right to a lawyer. I have the right to a jury trial, and that, quite honestly, I'd much rather be able to have to convince one person out of 12, that I'm innocent, than to sit there and hope that a guy in a black robe who gets paid by the government is going to declare my innocence. Because he gets paid for that. Okay, decentralized elections. Here's the big one. There is no one unit out there that controls the elections. Each of the states control them, and then the counties control them. and then that. So good luck trying to control those elections.
Well,
And
I
that.
think it's part of the military thing is try to intimidate that, but I don't think that's going to
No,
happen.
no.
I do have one concern about the military option, and I'm sure that somebody has worked it out. I don't know how exactly this works, and that's that. First of all, when does the order become unlawful? Okay, to me, it might be that um, when Trump orders, say, army units deployed in a city with with live ammo.
Uh huh.
To me, that would be the unlawful order. All
Yes.
right. Yeah. To be ordered, because the next step is the order to fire. That's the
Well,
next
yeah. If,
step.
they,
Is the
if they're going to put them out there with live ammo, then they probably sit there and tell them they got the right to use lethal force. It's the lethal force part, even though they're being told they can use it, that I'm I'm hoping these guys got enough brains to sit there and go, no, we're not going to shoot anybody. I don't care who you
right.
are.
Well, not at the line level, but at what point will command decide that this is an illegal order? But here's the deal: how does that work? What do they do? If you're the general in charge of that, the Chicago deployment, let's say, you're the general, you're the command level, you're one of those 800 guys, ladies, one of those 800 people in that room, and you're deployed in Chicago. What happened? Do you have enough support among the others that you say it's unlawful and someone needs to walk into the Oval Office?
And let him know. Yes.
Yeah, and make it stop. Make it stop. And also, I'm not sure that it's just how they extend it to the vice president. who I believe
Well, I
is
wouldn't
also.
trust the vice president any more than I trust,
Well, I'm just saying,
JD Vance is an idiot.
how do they feel comfortable extending it to the three people they have to be concerned with? Well, four people. They need to be concerned about the president, the vice president, the secretary of defense slash war, the speaker of the House, and the president of the Senate. So they do have five people they need to be concerned with at this point. Before the 2026 election, these are the people they need to be concerned about. Do they arrest all of them? And how does they handle it? And how does the public relations look for
Yeah.
that?
Okay. First, I don't necessarily see anybody at that level being arrested. We're just simply disobeying them. We're not gonna do as they say. Okay.
But
Now
then Hexit has the power
that's where
to
well
relieve
that's
them.
where Congress has to finally step up. And I'm wondering when, because quite honestly, most of the Republicans in Congress are afraid to do anything or won't do anything because they don't want to lose their seats. They consider their seats to be far more important, and their ability to collect a paycheck than the country. Okay, so and that, and so that's why. I mean, the only option we got is to impeach or have an election that takes them out of office, and I don't want to think of any other options that are
Well,
out
he
there.
can't be allowed to. I don't think he can be allowed to issue any further orders. How do you stop him from issuing any further orders besides not obeying any of the orders, standing down?
That is a good question. How would we do that?
Maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's the standing down. We are not following order. We are all standing down. And if they get it deep enough that the colonels under them and even the majors under them all stand down, you know, you know, you know, to
Pull
the
the
point
troops
where
back to and pull the troops back to their barracks.
yeah,
You know.
right, yeah, well,
Yeah.
that I think would be probably part of the
Yeah.
definition.
Yeah.
Are back to base,
Or
back to
or something at this point they could simply refuse to deploy them. Period. They can sit there and say no. Sorry, that's not under our mandate. That is an illegal order, and we're not going to honor that.
It's
And,
interesting
and,
that
and
we haven't seen conversations
yeah.
about this yet. We haven't seen the conversations out on the web or any place about what has to happen, like what you're saying, And I think that's the confusing. That's the like the open question that you're getting at was it's hard to well that's one of the institutions that makes it hard for the fascists to take over to control the United States,
And and
and
he- and here's and here's another thing too that um, as much as you and I are for gun control, we don't like the idea of all these guns being out there. Quite honestly, right now, having an armed civil society, while controversial, it adds a layer of deterrence.
yeah, yeah.
Out there. One of the things I've joked about has been, yeah, you can send the troops into Chicago, but boy, I'll tell you, they better watch out because a lot of those people in Chicago are willing to use those guns.
Well, and if you
you
have
know,
if you have veteran cadre, well, eventually, I don't see this happening anytime soon. But if it were if the military didn't do the right thing, you could have veteran cadres who reorganize and who know how to use sniper rifles and advanced and automatic rifles.
oh,
Uh, the
AR-15s are all over the place.
yeah, the thing is one of the key things about military I learned this at DoD is that the insurgency, the insurgents can beat you. The Vietnamese did beat us because they were insurgent most of the time. They would
That's right.
attack when we were at our weak points, and they would retreat when it was not to their favor. That's what most of the principles of insurgency work on. So if the troops show up, okay, we're not. We're just organizing back here and keeping quiet. And then if they make noise, then we get noisy, and then we draw. So they, yeah. So I hope we didn't just stage something there. We staged a
Well,
revolution.
imagine the optics if uh, they start if the troops actually start to shoot back. Okay, if they bring tanks in, okay, I would imagine that the people of this country would be screaming bloody murder about what the hell do you mean that you're using a tank, in a city? What are you
Yeah.
nuts? and
Well,
that
you
I don't see them accepting that.
well, and we're on the edge of it. Up in your area, they just had that raid on the apartment building. Most of the apartment building was raided, and
Yeah,
they children in. It's
yeah,
like
oh
what?
yeah,
That's ICE. That's not the military. But that's
yeah,
what they would be asking the military to do is to isolate the insurgents, the resistors in their buildings and blow the buildings up. That's how
yeah,
that works if you're
yeah,
deploying the military. And
yeah.
yeah, no, I don't think that's going to happen. You know.
Well, right now, even people see the more ICE does that, the more the optics are bad, and people are going to be, just screaming bloody murder about it. And here's the thing: his attempts to try to keep that secret are not going to work very well because what's one of the toughest things you can keep in Washington D.C. It's a secret.
Secret.
Okay, and the way our media ecosystem works here in this country is that we've got a vast, diverse, and often adversarial media landscape. Controlling the narrative in nationwide is impossible. You are not going to be able to do that whatsoever, and that's the neat thing about it. And that, so, quite honestly, the question then gets down to, well, what would it take for a takeover of the U.S. in a meaningful way, or actually, okay. So one would need to first off win control of all three branches of government. Okay, they would need to try to undermine or bypass state government.
All right.
They would need to suppress civil liberties without triggering mass unrest, which I don't see happening. Okay, and also the way things are set up. Good luck trying to bypass state governments. They would need to co-opt or neutralize the military and law enforcement, and they would need to control or silence the media and digital platforms. And one of the things that's been driving them nuts has been the mere fact that people like you and I are out there speaking out against them and saying, no, 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 this ain't
Yeah.
by the day. All right. And then, so the internet has, while it was their friend for a while for them when they got elected, is now turning against them. It's like the courts. One of the, as an example, you could sit there and Eisenhower. I remember when he bemoaned putting Earl Warren in as the Chief Justice because they thought they were putting a reliable conservative in there, and the
Yeah.
guy turns out to be the most liberal justice they ever had.
Right.
And so you never know because, quite honestly,
Most liberal chief justice. Most liberal chief justice. I
yeah,
would say
okay, all
probably
right,
ones that.
but
Yeah.
point is that you give somebody a lifetime appointment like that. And it's like, oh, well, hey, I'm free to do whatever I want. And he did. And in 10 to 1 says he just was, he had ideas in his head that he didn't share with anybody. But once he got on the Supreme Court as the Chief Justice, he's like going, let's go to town. And that, and so it's not just difficult, it's structurally incompatible with how the U.S. has been built. I mean, even in times of crisis, pandemics, wars, and what have you. I had one guy on Facebook who was sitting there going, "Oh, we can't hold elections during the Civil War because it's illegal." No,
No.
it's not. There's never been a law or an amendment or anything that's been made that says we can't hold an election during wartime or during civil unrest or any of that stuff.
You did.
We,
You
yeah,
did.
we've held it. Yeah, well, Lincoln got reelected in 1864 in the midst of
Now,
a civil war.
because they're parliamentary, that guy's thinking of the British. Because as a parliamentary system, the term of a prime minister is determined by a vote inside the British House, right? The
Right,
House of Commons.
right.
Yeah, they can have an election in the middle of a war and change governments. They can decide not to have an election until right after the war is over, and they kick Churchill out right
So,
after. So
so now let's go over to how this thing with with supposed withholding taxes, where the blue states who by the way, and help me out here with the term, but the blue states pretty much they send out more money than they get in from the feds,
the
and the
blues are
red
the givers,
states, what?
givers and takers.
Yeah,
The blue states are
givers
the
and
givers,
takers, right? We're givers, and the red states are takers, all right, and all that.
and the red states, the blue cities are the givers.
Yeah,
The red rural are the takers.
yeah,
This is the way it works.
yep. And so here's the
Typically,
thing. Here's first off, here's how federal taxes are collected. Mostly directly from individuals and businesses. The IRS collects federal income taxes, payroll taxes, Social Security, Medicare, corporate taxes directly from taxpayers. They don't do it through the state governments. All right. Withholding by employers they take those again. They take those taxes out. They pay them directly to the federal government. Everything. Okay. Now, this is why states can't withhold federal tax dollars because we have no legal mechanism in which to do it.
they have one way.
Well, hang on. All
Okay.
right. Okay. There's a supremacy clause also in the U.S. Constitution that makes federal law supreme, and states supposedly cannot override or obstruct those federal tax laws. And then attempting to block withholding. If a state tries to stop federal tax withholding from government employees, it would be illegal. The federal government could respond with lawsuits, sanctions, or even invoke the emergency powers in extreme cases. So, what's the
You're
one way
saying
you think
you're
they can
saying
do it?
were you saying state employees? The
No,
money
I
of
said
state.
no. I'm saying federal. Federal.
Yeah.
It
So I
says
think
withholding from
I think
government. Yeah.
I think they're withhold that what they could withhold, and again, it's not overwhelming. Okay, as much as they would seemingly be able to withhold would be the payroll taxes for state employees.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I don't know what that would mean for California in terms of the big picture for California or say New York. Those are big states with big payrolls. But that's the only way I could see it. And
Right.
I don't
But
know if that has the impact that they would like to get.
yeah, we'd have to look at the percentage of the impact on that one there because, quite honestly, private employment is bigger than the state employment.
Sure, sure,
And
sure,
that,
sure.
yeah. So,
Yeah,
and that,
yeah.
and so that would,
Oh, and,
so
and I think they'd have to shove it over to a trust fund in the meantime too. They still take the taxes out, but shove it to a trust fund.
oh, okay. But here's what we can do. Here's what we
Okay,
can do. This is
okay.
interesting. All
All right.
right. All right, they have other tools, the states. One of them is obviously litigation; they can sue. Okay, the other one is it's called, and I just learned about this. It's called the anti-commandeering doctrine, where states can refuse to use their resources to enforce federal laws or programs. And this was, by the way, if anybody wants to look up the case,
Yeah.
it was affirmed in Murphy v. NCAA back in 2018.
Huh.
Yeah, and so
Huh.
that's kind of interesting. They can do policy resistance, and that states can pass laws that conflict with federal priorities. For example, marijuana legislation, sanctuary policies, which is protected under federalism. Public advocacy, governors and legislatures can rally public opinion and pressure Congress. And that, and then the rest of us, it's quite honestly it's up to the rest of us individuals, the population of the United States, to where we can turn around and say, no, this ain't happening, and that through protesting and things like that, and have to realize that what you've seen happening in Chicago or what you saw happening in Los Angeles with ICE and all that, yeah, you're gonna it's not gonna be an easy process.
Yeah.
And that, but
The
then again, maintaining our democracy has never been an easy process.
right, and I think what you're getting at is I think it's the threat of all these things.
Hmm.
We don't know how effective they are, but if they're saber rattling, we can saber rattle too.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
For them to think that they can just simply take over everything and what and that's what they're trying to make it look like. It's like, yeah, we can take over everything, and all this, because of this, and this. But the reality is no, it's not so simple, not so easy. And we really have to do is just stand up to them. And like I've always said, if you got somebody bullying you and they won't back off, well, punch them, punch back, because sometimes that's all they'll listen to.
Worrisome part is what's the goal? So there are those who want control. There's in that MAGA movement and the Trumps and the administration. There are those who want control, absolute authoritarian control. But there are those, especially in the authors of Project 2025, who just want to break it so then they can move in with their agenda and control. So they do want
Well,
to break us, you
right,
know.
right.
And
Well, they're trying to
and
do
here's
like
the
what Orban did.
well, the problem with that model is that fascists generally want to maintain control by we're going to have a big army and you're all going to be drafted and you'll have to take orders from us. We're going to put people back to work. Okay, we're going to make the trains run on time. We're going to do shit that'll make you happy.
Yep,
Okay, even though
yep.
we're taking a bunch of stuff away from you, we're going to do certain. Now they're doing. We're going to break everything, and we don't know what's happening after
Well,
that.
right, yeah. Well, their thought is that if they break it, okay, then we'll just put it back together the way we want it. All right. Well, the problem is now it's broken and they have no control. And there are those. You're
They don't
correct.
know how
There are
to do. They
those.
don't know how to govern anyway. They do not know how to govern.
Right, right.
Right there was the
And
principle
which is where
right
their
there.
problem is. You
Give
know,
people
and
stuff that they want.
yeah. Well, and Orban and even Erdogan in Turkey, okay, and even Putin, to a large extent, Putin in particular was very popular because he made everybody feel like oh we're getting something out of all of this, life is
Yeah,
better, and all this sort of stuff, and then slowly took it all away from him as he took more and more authoritarian
which we
control.
didn't have a whole lot of anyway. So that's the
Right.
other problem with us. We had a whole lot of freedom and liberty, to an extent, as long as you didn't have student loans or other things burdening you, debts burdening you.
Oh
Other
yeah,
than debt,
but that doesn't
other
take
than
away
debt,
your freedoms. Yeah.
yeah, we could at least gripe about the student loans and or whatever is putting us into peonage of some kind. So we still had some of that. Those other countries, okay, you were taking away, and you were giving them a bunch of stuff. You're taking away something that they didn't have a lot of anyway. Although they're only tolerating. I think the Hungarians only tolerate so much because they know they're surrounded by democracies, and they're a little teeny tiny. I was going to say the word pissant country, which that's not a model for the United States. A country, I think they're 8 or 10 million. Hungary is like 8 or 10 million people, medium size, one of the smaller U.S. states, and you can't have, you can't have. Well, you can have your little dictatorship there, but you can't use that as a model for 340 million people, 50 states, thousands of counties, thousands of other villages, townships, all those things that are, you know, 50 National Guards. Yeah, it's just complex and a huge, except maybe for the Chinese, the largest bureaucracy in the world. Well, the Indians
Yeah.
probably the Indians have a good sized one too. But basically the three big countries have the three largest bureaucracies. India, the United States, and China have the largest bureaucracies in the world. The Indians, the Chinese have an authoritarian model. The Indians have something of a democratic model, but and then we have our at-risk model right now. So yeah, and yeah, the I think the thing at that meeting of the 800, Noble 800, Noble 600, right? The charge of the Light Brigade is the oh shit, we may have to do something.
Yep.
We may
Yep.
have to do something we don't really want to do. That's always been, because time and again, I think people are going, so like, when does anybody step in and, do what's right? You know, when does anybody, yeah, because he's been doing wrong left and right, you know. Uh, and everybody he puts in charge of anything, apparently they think they are in charge of breaking it. I just saw a report on Kerry Lake in charge of the global media, which they changed the name. It's the United States Global Media, which used to be the Voice of America and a few other things like that. And she basically broke it, And there's a court injunction now, and she may be in contempt.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
but here's the thing. It's you, without it drives me nuts because Congress is not doing anything. They're just being totally compliant with whatever Trump wants to do, and it drives you nuts. I mean, the Democrats are trying to do their best, but they're not quite sure how to attack this thing, and everything. Fortunately, we've got Gavin Newsom, and we got J.B. Pritzker, and we got Hochul in New York. And that we got what's his name and who's the guy in Pennsylvania?
Shapiro, Josh
Shapiro.
Shapiro.
Okay, Josh Shapiro and that and so these guys are all standing up and saying, hey, no, this is what you go, no, this is what we're going to do, and that. But again, it's going to take a lot of people. Now I understand that there is a No Kings protest that's going to be happening. I think it's on October 18th. I believe it's on October 18th, but I'm not 100% sure, and I have no way of looking it up. Uh,
Hmm.
at let me check.
Nationwide protest, not just Chicago, but nationwide.
Yeah, nationwide, No Kings thing. So hang on just a second. Let me see if I can look this up real quick. Yep, October 18th. Okay, and it's a nationwide protest, so everybody needs to look up online where the nearest one is for them, and that because the last one, we got millions of people out there. Okay, now we need millions more because it's gotten to be a lot more serious than it was
Yeah,
before. And I think our next conversation, Tim, because we're getting close to being out of time here, but I think our next conversation, maybe what we ought to do is to concentrate on what is it that we're going to do once we regain power.
yeah.
And that
Well, this
because
is
there's a lot of stuff that needs to
I was
change.
just thinking about that, and how do you continue to maintain the democracy when you have to put on trial a whole bunch of people?
Yeah, yeah, that, and the thing, and the key here.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and the key
Yeah.
here too is we can't be like Merrick Garland and be holding back. It's like no, you put the guy on trial. You give him his day in court because that's what everybody has a right to, and that nobody, and I don't care who you are, is above the law.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and that so quite honestly, I mean, for them, for the Justice Department to sit there and go, oh, we're not going to, charge a sitting president with a crime. That's a policy. That's not a freaking law. That's a
Right.
policy and a part of the judicial, and all that. And they claim they've got constitutional backing for it, but there ain't nothing in the Constitution that sits there and says the president of the United States is above the law. If he commits murder, you arrest him.
Yeah.
You put him in jail just like anybody else.
Back to the military just for 1 second in closing, and that's the fact that they're sitting there going, okay, so if I follow Trump, I may be put on trial by the next administration. If I
You know,
if I refuse Trump's order, okay, and
right.
they, yeah, no, excuse me, if I follow Trump's order, I may be put on trial by the next administration.
You know
So,
something? Who's our Bondi? Pam Bondi is our Attorney General, and I read an article there where she was looking at exactly that. She's kind of like going, well, do I do what he tells me to do and then follow him into jail, or do I just turn around and tell him, no, we're not going to do this?
well,
You know,
and I hate to say kudos to these ladies, but Boebert and Green and I think Mace have all signed on to the, releasing the Epstein files to Congress,
right,
right?
right,
Right, and it's like they had to at some point make a choice with their women voters primarily. Whose side are you on? You
yeah,
know, and I
yeah.
still hope they're not sent back to Congress.
Well, and here's the thing too. Yeah, I agree with you there. But here's the thing too is the young lady who just got elected to Congress from Arizona, and they're refusing to give her the oath of office because she knows she'll be the 218th signature demanding release of those Epstein files and everything. And you got the Commerce Secretary, coming out and going, well, the guy was a big manipulator. I was his next door neighbor, and oh, he had a massage table in the middle of his house, and all this sort of stuff. And they're trying to paint Epstein differently. All right, they're doing whatever they can to try to lessen the blow of this thing, and it's just freaking amazing in that,
It's
and
not gonna. It's if people were doing things to underage people, they're doomed.
yeah, because one of the things I've always heard, and that unfortunately I've never been in prison or anything, but I've always heard that child molesters,
Get the yeah.
their time in prison is pretty limited because the prisoners in there do not cotton to
Yeah.
child molesters
Yep.
whatsoever.
Yep.
And so they'll get rid of them real quick,
Have to have a
and
child
that's
molester island.
yeah,
We know
yeah,
just the place.
yes, exactly. So, Tim,
All right.
based on all that,
Thank you.
okay, my name,
All right.
ladies
So
and
until
gentlemen,
next
thank
time.
you much. we hope we hope this has been informative to you, and that because that's what it's meant to be. So, Nat, with that, we will sign off here. My name is Rich Carling,
And my name's Tim Bagwell. And
and
for
we
Two
wish
Grumpy
you
Old
well.
Men, bye bye.
Bye bye.